Hello and welcome to How to Paint the Citadel Way. This video is aimed at newcomers to the miniature painting hobby. I am your host, Jimmy Stender, and I'll be covering subjects such as how to assemble your miniatures, how to undercoat, and I'll be covering the various types of paints from Citadel, and much more. I have divided this video into chapters for ease of access, so let's begin. Okay, first off I would like to show you what I'll be painting today. First and foremost I will be painting this Fireslayer's Battlesmith plastic miniature. Next I will be painting a resin ultimate Barghest Fiend from Greenstuff World. The paints and undercoats I will be using are from Citadel. I've added mixing balls from Army Painter to my paints. You don't have to do this yourself, I just find them effective when I shake my paints, especially with my older paint pots. There are some tools besides paints that I will be using throughout this video. If I have forgotten some, I'll mention it when I get to it. First off, dual paint pots. I'll be using this one to wash off my brush and this one for diluting my paint. I will also be using a wet palette. I will also be using some fine detail cutters from Games Workshop. And my trusted hobby knife. And a flash brush for resin miniatures. I will also be using a mold line remover. Also, quite importantly, I will be using some painting handles. I will also be using both super glue and plastic glue. And finally some paint brushes. I got quite a few here. And some paper towel. I think that covers it. Oh, I forgot to mention, a cutting mat. It's quite important when you're using your hobby knife. If you don't own a brush yet, I would like to recommend the Most Wanted brush set from the Army Painter. It's 3 brushes and it's everything you need to get started. It contains a detail brush, a regiment brush and a small dry brush. First off, I'll be assembling this plastic miniature. For this I will need my plastic cutters, or my precision cutters. When all the pieces have been cut out, you can take your hobby knife and cut away those little, I don't know the word in English, attachments, like so. Next up you want to find mold lines and take your mold line remover and, well, remove them. This might take a while, but it's definitely worth it. With those pesky mold lines gone, it's time to glue the model together. And as the name indicates, we need a plastic glue. Don't use too much of it. A little bit goes a long way. Just hold it together for a few seconds and you should be good to go. Voila! Alright, I've assembled my miniature. As you can see, I have added a couple of skulls to the base just to add some decoration. Also, he seems to be missing his head. I've attached it to this sub-assembly holder from Games Workshop. I just thought that if I glued the head on, it would be very difficult to paint the front of the miniature. So, this is how I roll. Next, I want to assemble my resin miniature. But before I do anything, I want to wash it first. Alright, when I finished washing the resin miniature, I removed the mold lines as well, just like the plastic miniature. So now it's time to glue it together, and this time we are not using plastic glue, we are using super glue. I'll be using this one because it's thin, I like that. Be right back. Okay, I've finished gluing together this Barghest, and as I expected, it has several gaps in it. If you can see it right here, for example, and right here. What you can do is use some green stuff to correct this, but I prefer to use plastic putty from Vallejo, so I'm going to do that. Okay, what I'll do is I'll put it on directly. Filling those gaps. And then, using a moist brush, I'll paint it however I want it and remove the excess. Continue to do this until you're satisfied. Now the putty just needs to dry and we are ready to undercoat the miniatures. I would like to use contrast paint on this resin model. So for this model I'll undercoat it in Wraithbone. And for my plastic miniature I'll use Corax White. Before I undercoat my models, I would like to attach them to this spray handle from Citadel. The base is quite easy to snap in. But this one doesn't have a base just yet, so I'll be using some blue tack to attach this to the spray handle. So let's go outside. Once your miniatures are cleaned, assembled and undercoated, you're ready to begin in earnest. Painting is a very enjoyable and rewarding aspect of this hobby. The most important things are decent seating and good quality light. Also make sure your painting area is large enough to work comfortably at. Especially if you plan to put many hours into your hobby. Oh, and finally, make sure you have something to drink. And don't confuse it with your paint water, however. Yes, I am talking from experience. Citadel base paints. They are specially formulated for base coating your models. It's designed to give clean coverage with 1 or 2 thin coats. They are an essential tool to any miniature painter and often the first paint you apply to any given model. The undercoat is now completely dry, so I'm ready to add my first coat of base paint. One of the most important tips I can give you is always dilute your paint with water. 2 thin coats are better than 1 thick one, as 1 coat can ruin small details on your model. I usually mix paint with water at a 1-to-1 rate. If in doubt, add more water. I'll start with the skin. Here I'll use Bugman's Glow. I tend to start with what you can see the most. In the case of this miniature, it's the skin. First I'll take 2 brush fills with Bugman's Glow and add it to my water palette. Then I'll take 2 drops of water or 2 brushfuls of water. So roughly a 50-50 mix. Mix it well together. Then clean off your brush. And we are ready to paint. And as I just said, 2 thin coats are better than 1 thick one. Oh, sorry, you couldn't see. Before I continue, I would just like to say that if during the painting process you make any mistakes, I mean if you hit the undercoat, it doesn't matter because we're going to paint over that later in the video. But if you hit something you already painted, just let the paint dry and go back and use the previous color and correct it. When I've painted the Avalanche Sunset on, I am practically finished base coating everything. You'll probably notice that I haven't painted on the runes yet, but I'll save those for last. So stay tuned for that. With all the base paint dry, it's time to add some shades. Citadel shades can be washed onto a model to create areas of darker color, defining details and accentuating recesses. They make painting very easy. Shades are formulated to flow over paints and into the recesses of your miniature. Once applied, they dry to provide a very effective matte shading to your models. Having washed the model in this way, you can then add layer highlights. The great thing about shades is that they are very easy to use. Simply load the shade onto your brush and paint it onto the desired area. The more you paint on, the heavier the shading will be. Likewise, if you apply a single thin wash, the effect will be more subtle. Well, let's begin. I use shades straight from the pot. If you feel the color is too dark for your taste, then dilute it with some water. Give the paint pot a good shake and we are ready to go. I won't be shading the hair and the beard just yet. I will wait for a later stage to do that. Shade paints can take up to half an hour to dry, so now is a good time to take a break and stretch your legs. You can drink a cup of coffee. You can go for a walk. Or maybe even dance. Enough of that, let's get back to painting. Layering is all about creating a realistic effect of light hitting your miniature. If done well, it makes your models appear more natural, richer in color with a wider range of tones, and, best of all, they will look absolutely fantastic on the battlefield. Layer paints enable highlighting across your miniatures with easy transition from one color to the next. They are designed to paint over base paints and each other, without any mixing and a little bit of watering down. I still recommend a roughly 1-to-1 mix of paint and water. Let's continue. Now it's time to layer the gold, and for this I'm going back to Retributor armor. There is nothing against using base paints as a layer paint as well, just remember to thin it down. The shade made the gold look pretty dark, so I'm going to, as I said, use Retributor armor once again to layer it up. Remember to avoid the recesses. And now it's time to highlight the leather, and for this I'm going to use Eshin Grey. Highlighting is a little bit like layering, but it's a little different. This time I'm only going to paint the extreme edges and corners and the most raised areas. So for example, like this. I'll use the side of my brush to get some Eshin Grey right there. I won't touch the flames at this stage, not until later in this video. Don't forget to change your paint water from time to time. I recommend changing the water after every other step. Now we have concluded our first set of layers. We're going to continue some layering and some shading now. Once the Fugan Orange shade is dry, I'll use Caribou Crimson, but only halfway through the beard and the hair. And when that's dry, I'm going to use Null Oil and only use it at the very bottom to make a fiery effect. Let's begin. You might think it looks a little strange right now, but I promise you, once we're finished with the model, it will look great. What we're going to do next is highlight all the gold and silver. And to do that, we are going to use Runefang Steel. There are three things I want to highlight at this stage: the gold, the silver, and those little nits on the leather. Drybrushing is one of the first painting techniques that many painters learn. It's a very handy way of picking out details on a model or applying highlights quickly and easy. CITADEL makes dry compounds, which are of a much thicker consistency than base or layer paints, appearing crumbly. This makes them perfect for dry brushing and combined with their formulation ensures that they provide excellent coverage. Don't water them down before use. Dry compounds are meant to be like this. Despite being a simple technique to learn, dry brushing has plenty of application and army painters will often find themselves returning to it again and again. The principle of dry brushing is to rapidly brush your loaded paintbrush against the model, with the intent of passing paint only to raised areas of the model. A dry brush layer can serve as a quick way to accentuate the details of a model, and many painters choose to use it across their collections. I'll begin with the hair and the beard, and for this I'm going to use Kindle Flame. First I load off my brush. And then I wipe out most of it on a tissue. And when there's almost nothing left, you're ready to go. The next step on this model is to add a glaze to the hair and the beard. Glazing is a technique where you heavily water down a color to add a tint to an already fully painted area. Contrast paints, already being translucent, are particularly good at making glazes. However, you can also use base and layer paints if you prefer. CITADEL used to make ready-to-use glazes such as this Lamentus Yellow. Sadly, they are not produced anymore. I'll use Lamentus Yellow on my Battlesmith so it fits in with the rest of my Fireslayer army. I'll still show you how you can make your own glaze. First, I'll take 5 drops of contrast medium and mix it with 1 drop of my preferred color. Just like so. As you can see, it's very thin and translucent. One example could be to add this Flesh Tearer's red glaze over an armor painted with Lead Belcher and Runefang steel, to add a tint that resembles a Khorne allegiance. But for now I'll glaze our Battlesmith with the Lamentus Yellow. The last step, besides the base and varnish, is to paint the fiery runes on the body. For this I'll be using a super detail brush from the Army Painter. When the paint is dry, I'll add a final layer of Uriel yellow. And after that, there's only one thing left to do. Assemble the model. We'll paint the base later on. Citadel contrast paints are designed to both paint and shade your models at the same time with only a single coat of paint. This is meant primarily for painters who want to see good results as fast as possible. Contrast paints can of course be used with the previous painting methods we've discussed. I will show you how on this ultimate Barghest Fiend produced by Green Stuff World. The model has been undercoated in Wraith Bone, which is an undercoat designed for contrast paints. Let's begin. I'll paint the flesh using Cygor Brown. I won't be thinning it down, but if you feel the color is too strong, you can thin it with some medium. I'll just get some on my palette here. Wash out my brush. The reason I'm putting it on my palette is so I can control how much I get on my brush. Like so. And then I'll just add it to the model. The Cygor Brown is about to dry right now. I hope the camera picks it up, but you can see it has been shading the model and made some highlights. This was with one coat of paint. It is that easy. And there you have it, my Barghest is complete. All we need to do now is make some bases. In this section I'll show you how I paint my bases. My Fire Slayer Battlesmith will have a steaming hot lava base. And my Barghest will have a cobblestone base, so I can use it in games of Mordheim. I found this one on eBay. Well, let's begin! Even though my Battlesmith and Barghest are technically finished, there is still more optional work to be done, if you wish. In this section of the video, I'll show you some very easy ways to make rust, verdigris, blood and gutter sewage. Let's begin. I'll begin with Nurgle's rod to make some gutter sewage. You can apply this straight from the pot, but I recommend that you do it in several layers. Put on the first one and you'll see it's quite transparent. Let it dry and then put on another if you wish. Let's try it out. I've added 2 coats of Nurgle's rod. It looks quite disgusting, just the way I like it. Next I would like to add some rust to those chains. To start with, I will use Typhus Corrosion, which is a textured technical paint. Don't use your best brush when using this stuff, because it can really ruin your brushes. So I found an old brush I don't use anymore, and I'll apply it with that. Let's begin. I've painted Typhus Corrosion onto the parts where I'd like to see some rust. Next I'm going to dry brush it with Riser Rust. After applying Riser Rust, I will add a final dry brush of Stormhost Silver. A very light dry brush. And with that, the rust is complete. Next up, we're going to add some verdigris to that color. The best advice I can give you here is less is more. And with that, the verdigris is complete. This miniature has several cuts across it, and for that I would like to add some blood. To do that, I'll use blood for the blood guard. You can paint it on directly from the pot, and if you would like it to be darker, you can mix it with some black paint. When the blood is dry, the model is finally complete. If you want to use your painted miniature in games, I would strongly recommend that you varnish them. By far the easiest and quickest way to do this is by using the Monitorium Varnish from Games Workshop. Just apply it all over and you're done. However, I really don't like this spray. It will make all your metal matte and ruin the blood effects. So instead I'm going to paint it on by hand. And for that I'm using Ultra Varnish Matte by AK Interactive. I will make a 50-50 mix with contrast medium and then apply it to the places where I want to protect the miniature. And there we have it! How to paint the Citadel Way. I really hope that this video has inspired you to paint your own miniatures. It is a very rewarding hobby, even if you don't play the games associated with the miniatures. You can still have hours of fun with a few miniatures and some bottles of paint. I would love to see whatever you paint, so if you share your work on Instagram with the hashtag JimmyStender, I'll be sure to see it. With that said, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like and comment, and I'll be sure to send more videos your way. And I hope my broken English was understandable. Happy painting!